Government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
It is the 17th day of March 2008. Beware of the Ides of March, they say, a very unlucky month in history. It's when armies go on the march. It's the month of Mars, of war. We're going to be live here again for the next 3 hours. This is a massive, totally jam-packed broadcast lined up for you today. We have Ugyen Tenzin joining us from India, where the Tibetan government is in exile. He is the director of the Tibetan Center for Human Rights and Democracy with the Dalai Lama. We're going to cover the mass murder and tyranny that's going on there as our government fully supports it criminally. Daniel Sanjata, of course, star of screen, stage, and film, television, really upset and angry about Geraldo Rivera coming out and demonizing 9/11 truthers and saying that we're behind bombings, and now we have other evidence of attempted setups in New York. The star of Rescue Me will be joining us for 30 minutes in 1 hour. Barbara Pinninger, whose parents have gone into hospice, and they're trying to basically euthanize them. And then Bob Chapman from the International Forecaster will be with us in the 3rd hour covering the financial news. We're going to get into financial news after the 15, 20-minute coverage coming up of what's happening in Tibet. But people are losing their lives. They're under martial law. The communist Chinese are just absolutely corrupt aggressors in all of this. And we're going to be breaking down the inside scoop on what's going on there. And the 80-plus dead as of last night, the numbers are only growing. So that's coming up from the Dalai Lama's government in exile in India, right next door to Tibet there, just east of them. It's there on the western side. You always think of Tibet above China because it's the roof of the world, but it's really to the western side of China. They're bordering with India. Obviously, the economic news, I'm going to attempt to be as calm as possible at the bottom of the hour. After we cover Tibet, I'm just going to walk through what's happening. Our worst fears are being realized. I could barely sleep last night, even though I've been up since 6:30 a.m. the previous morning. I tossed and turned all last night, and you're not going to see fireworks today or tomorrow or next week or next month. But what has now happened are grievous, irreversible wounds in the financial structure, and it is going to mean that we are going to have a depression. We are going to have a depression now. And we had tried to reverse it. We tried to politically get people motivated to blame the New World Order. They would have backed off and not done this. But 99% chance we're going to have a full-blown depression. I mean, grapes of wrath, the whole 9 yards. But back then, the grapes of wrath, you didn't have the government swooping in and grabbing your children. This is all designed, and it is going to be really sick. And I've been saying it, hell is being released. Well, hell has been released. I watched them opening the black gates and releasing the Titan out of its pit, the financial Titan of financial ruin. And he's now left the pit, and he is now engaging the people. Meanwhile, Bush is doing his job, telling everybody, lay down, everything's fine, everything's wonderful. The government loves you as they engage in the purposeful implosion. Coming up, dollar nosedive stirs joint intervention jitters. Dollar tumbles after Fed's weekend action. Gold hits $1,030 an ounce. Huge brokerage firms go bankrupt one after another. Domino effect now in train. It's all coming up after we go to Tibet.
He's the T-Rex of political talk. Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network.
As we speak, the Supreme Court is moving to declare the Second Amendment dead. Chris Matthews is calling for basic gun bans and checkpoints like in the airports to disarm American citizens. The San Francisco Chronicle and Houston Chronicle reported FEMA camps have been built for the American people. Bear Stearns has basically gone bankrupt. The Carlyle Group has gone bankrupt. A domino effect has now been triggered, just as we predicted it would. Fiscal Armageddon, financial Armageddon, will be documenting all that coming up in about 22 minutes at the bottom of the hour. This is one of the most important broadcasts we've ever done. Now, we're about to be joined by the Tibetan Center for Human Rights and Democracy Director, and that is the main group fighting for Tibetan liberation, and he is the director, Ugyen Tenzin. There are few cases where brazen, unadulterated wars of aggression are more obvious than in the case of the peaceful Tibetans. Mao, of course, killed 60 million of his own people. In 1950, Chinese troops, the People's Liberation Army under Mao Zedong, marched into Tibet. And basically set up a dictatorship. Then in 59, they just howitzer all of the main temples into dust. And they rolled cannons up to defenseless people and just slaughtered hundreds of thousands. They forced Tibetan women to marry Chinese men to eradicate them. They also fully enforce one child, sterilizing women after one baby. They kind of wink-wink in China proper. They don't give preferential loans to the Tibetans, or they give them to them in very high interest rates. The Tibetans are basically being exterminated. There's very small amounts of them left, what there was, barely hanging on. You don't hear in the news why all this started. Well, the big anniversary of their invasion, the Communist Chinese murderous invasion, just coming into a totally sovereign nation, one of the oldest countries in the world, Tibet, and they came in. I'm just giving you some background before we go to our guest. And it's just been a reign of genocide and terror, kind of accelerated what the U.S. did to the Native Americans. But it's been accelerated and much more successful in a quicker time frame. And the big news here is, in the past, our government would decry this and say China was bad. They don't now. And our media is not telling you, it's in the foreign press, and it's confirmed, that on the anniversary of the Communist Chinese takeover, they like to go around and randomly arrest hundreds of people, and the Tibetans finally got tired of having their doors knocked down at night and drug off to be killed or tortured or have their organs taken. And so the Tibetans finally went out in the streets and started burning down some of the government buildings and things. Okay, joining us is the director from India, where they're in exile, of the Tibetan Center for Human Rights and Democracy, Ugyen Tenzin. Thank you for coming on, sir.
Hello.
Again, thank you for joining us. Tell us about the center, what you do, and in a nutshell, what's happening in Tibet. We're now told the death toll's way above 80.
Well, actually, the Tibet Center for Human Rights and Democracy is the primary Tibetan NGO documenting the human rights abuses taking place in Tibet. And for the last more than a decade, then we have been documenting various forms of human rights violations taking place in Tibet. And we have been issuing various updates from time to time to the international community about all the human rights violations that has been taking place over decades of Chinese rule in Tibet.